Off the coast of Virginia, the ocean floor was recently rearranged on purpose. Massive ships vacuumed up millions of tons of sand, carved shapes that looked as if a giant ice cream scoop had scraped the seabed. It wasn't a geological disaster. It was the first phase of one of the boldest and largest engineering projects in U.S. history. To understand why engineers are literally reshaping the seafloor, you have to look at the map. This is Hampton Roads, Virginia. This region is shaped by water. Two major cities, Norfolk and Hampton, face each other across a busy harbor. For decades, the main way to travel between them was the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel System, or HRBT, built back in the 1950s. It's basically a bridge that ducks underwater only at the ship channel, so cargo and Navy ships can pass above it. That system is now overwhelmed. At peak demand, close to 100,000 vehicles try to pass through this single crossing in a day, pushing it far beyond what it was designed to handle. The road was designed for a different era, when cars were bigger but the traffic was lighter. Today, it can regularly turn into a parking lot in the middle of the sea. But this problem goes beyond missed dinners and being late for work. It is also a national security crisis. Norfolk is home to the largest naval base on the planet. This is where the United States parks its expensive aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines. The base depends on roads. If a crisis happens, the Navy needs to move fast, and if the road is clogged, they'll get stuck in traffic. That makes the stakes incredibly high. At first, the fix sounds obvious. Too many cars? Build a bigger bridge. But Hampton Roads isn't a quiet river. Those aircraft carriers and cargo ships need a wide, unobstructed path to the ocean. A bridge becomes a low ceiling. You can't raise the bridge without blocking traffic for years, and you can't lower it without trapping the fleet. So, engineers chose the only option left: go underneath and create a unique expansion. The official price tag for this job sits at $3.8 billion. The goal is to create two new underwater tubes right next to the old ones, but the logistics here make it difficult. There's not enough land to start digging. The machine needs a dry launch pad to start the dig and a receiving pit to catch it on the other side. That's why the engineers decided to manufacture the land themselves. They brought in dredging ships that operate like floating vacuum cleaners. These vessels lower a suction head to the seafloor to inhale the seabed before pumping that mud water mix through miles of floating pipes. The output is amazing. The pipes shoot the mix up in high arcs that look like a cool, messy rainbow before it builds up on the surface. This process moved enough earth to expand the artificial islands by 15 acres, creating solid ground where there used to be open water. However, this was not just a simple vacuum job. This harbor has been a naval hub for centuries. The seabed is a graveyard of lost history. Dredging crews had to watch out for unexploded stuff hiding in the mud. We're talking about discarded explosives from centuries ago. Sucking something like that into a high-pressure pipe is a quick way to ruin the schedule. Once that new land was solid enough to stand on, the construction team needed a mechanical beast capable of eating through it. That's why they brought in a huge worm-like machine called Mary. Mary is way more than just a super giant drill. She is a factory on wheels that stretches longer than a football field and weighs over 9 million pounds, roughly the weight of stacking 9 fully loaded jumbo jets on top of each other. At the front of the machine sits a massive cutter head, 46 feet wide, covered in steel teeth that spin to chew through the soil while the rest of the machine builds the tunnel behind it. Building a machine this large costs $70 million. And she had to be shipped from Germany in pieces just to reach the job site. But the coolest part of this machine isn't the steel. It's the human element inside it. Those cutting teeth don't last forever. Grinding through wet sand and silt wears them down, and eventually, someone has to go in and change them. You can't just crack open a hatch down there. You're deep under the harbor with tons of water and mud pressing in from every direction. Instead, crews work inside sealed, pressurized sections of the machine. Many of the tools can be reached from inside the TBM itself, but it's still tight, loud, and unforgiving. Every move has to be planned. Systems have to stay carefully controlled. the work is slow, deliberate, and tightly monitored because mistakes here are expensive and dangerous. Digging with Mary was a dangerous balancing act. The ground under the harbor isn't solid rock. It's soft, wet silt that behaves like toothpaste. This created a constant nightmare for the pilots driving the machine. If Mary pushed forward too fast, she would over-excavate, meaning she would suck in too much dirt. This creates a void underground that travels up to the surface. On land, that makes a pothole. In the ocean, it creates a massive sinkhole that could swallow the water above and flood the tunnel. But if she moved too slowly, the sheer weight of the Atlantic Ocean would crush the tunnel face inward. To stop the ocean from winning, Mary used a pressurized slurry shield to push back against the mud, keeping the tunnel face stable while her cutters chewed forward. As she advanced, robotic arms installed concrete rings behind her, turning a hole in the mud into a rigid, waterproof tube in seconds. Steering her was another headache. Mary had no windshield. The pilots were driving blind through the dark. They had to rely on lasers and computers to navigate a strict curve deep underground. They had to hit a tiny target miles away. If they drifted off course by even a few inches, the tunnel wouldn't connect, and the project would be a failure. Mary launched in 2023, and despite all the challenges, after 29 months, she made her final breakthrough in September 2025. While it feels like the finish line, it's really the end of just one phase. Boring the tunnel creates the hollow space, but crews still have to build the tunnel's nervous system. They are currently installing the roadway, power, and lighting. But the most critical piece of tech is invisible to most drivers. It's the ventilation. The biggest danger in an underwater tunnel isn't a leak, it's fire. If a car catches fire deep underground, the smoke has nowhere to go. To solve this, engineers are installing massive jet fans that look like aircraft engines strapped to the ceiling. In an emergency, these fans spin up to hurricane speeds to suck the smoke out and push fresh air in, keeping the escape routes clear. It takes all this complex tech to make an underwater tube feel like a normal drive rather than a survival mission. But the transformation isn't just happening underwater. Above the surface, crews are rebuilding miles of highway to connect the new tubes to the rest of the world. When the sand settles and the ribbon is finally cut, the landscape of Virginia will look deceptively similar. The water will still be there, the ships will still sail, but underneath the surface, the dynamic of the region will have fundamentally shifted. For the commuter, it means getting out of the traffic jam. For the Pentagon, it means the assurance that the Atlantic fleet is never boxed in. But for the engineers, this project is a testament to something bigger. It's proof that not only we can build structures over obstacles, but we can also successfully transform the Earth to fit our needs. Engineers moved islands, vacuumed the seafloor, and bored through miles of unstable slime to create a path where nature never intended one to be. It's a fight against geology and a massive investment in national security. But in Hampton Roads, where the ocean meets the asphalt, it proves that the map is only permanent until it's time for another redraw. Deep under Tennessee, massive worm-like drills are about to carve out a tunnel that should turn an hour-long traffic headache into a 10-minute joyride. It could be one of the craziest US tunneling experiments in decades. But on the other side of the planet, Europe and Asia are actively testing the Hyperloop, the vacuum tube technology that seems out of this world. These are two totally different ideas, but they have the same goal: to make sci-fi travel a reality. For the first vision of the future, we have to focus on Nashville. The story here is about a blueprint for something called the Music City Loop. It's a proposal for a private paved underground highway meant for Tesla vehicles. The whole idea is point-to-point travel. You get in, pick a destination, and go straight there without stopping at every station. You can already ride a limited version in Las Vegas around the convention center. Nashville is supposed to be the city-scale test. The proposal is a direct underground link between Nashville International Airport and downtown. The new transit system is supposed to reduce a 9-mile, 40-minute trip to just around 8 minutes. If they pull this off, the experience should be truly futuristic. You hop in a car at the terminal, drop into a tunnel barely wider than the vehicle itself, and shoot through a pressurized tube. You bypass the gridlock, ignore the stoplights, and arrive at your hotel before people on the surface have even merged onto the highway. That all sounds amazing, but how close are we to this reality? The technology technically exists, but it has some massive issues. The system in Vegas is simple and it uses real drivers. To hit that 8-minute promise in Nashville, the cars can't be driven by humans. They'd have to drive themselves bumper to bumper at highway speeds inside a tunnel barely wider than the car. In a space that tight, human reflexes aren't fast enough. One hesitation or malfunction and the entire system turns into a traffic cork. So we need automated driving systems or really cool robots. But before we worry about AI-driven vehicles, there's one other issue. The real problem isn't the tunnel, it's the ground itself. Large parts of Tennessee sit on limestone, a rock that slowly dissolves like a sugar cube in water. Over time, that turns solid ground into something closer to Swiss cheese, filled with hidden caves and empty pockets. That's a problem for any tunneling project here. When a drill hits one of these hidden voids, it doesn't just slow down. It can suddenly break into the open air. Water can rush in. The machine can lose support beneath it. Tunneling here becomes a real-life game of Minesweeper. One unfortunate turn and the machine can fail and sink. Even worse, the collapse can travel upward, opening a sinkhole at the surface, right in the middle of a busy city street. But if the ground is this dangerous, why build this in Tennessee? The reason is simple. Nashville is in the middle of a massive traffic crisis. It's one of the fastest growing cities in America, and the surface roads are already at their breaking point. The city is desperate enough to try anything, even if it means drilling through a geological minefield. Engineers see Tennessee as the ultimate final boss for tunneling. If they can prove that this high-speed system works in limestone full of hidden caves, they can prove it works anywhere on Earth. It's a high-stakes bet. Solve Nashville's gridlock or watch a multi-billion-dollar project disappear into a sinkhole. But while Americans are busy fighting the ground, other parts of the world are trying to avoid it altogether and basically fly through the air. This brings us to the second vision of the future, the Hyperloop. For years, experts rejected this concept as too complex, but development didn't stop. In fact, right now, test tracks in China and Europe are running successful experiments that are breaking speed records. Here is how it works. When you stick your hand out of a moving car, you feel the air push back. The faster you go, the harder it fights you. At extreme speeds, air becomes a solid wall. That invisible wall is what limits how fast trains and planes can go. The Hyperloop solves this by cheating. You build a sealed tube, suck all the air out to create a vacuum, and levitate a pod inside using magnets. With almost no air and no wheel friction, the pod doesn't really roll anymore. It glides through the tube. China is currently leading this race. A state-owned contractor recently sent a pod through a low-vacuum tube at 387 miles per hour. That's faster than the Shanghai Maglev, the fastest train in commercial service. And they aren't stopping there. The goal is to hit airplane-like speeds. But achieving those high-speed numbers isn't what's holding this technology back. For a long time, Hyperloop could only go straight, so networks were impossible. However, recently, engineers in the Netherlands found a way to switch lanes in a vacuum tube, bending what was once a single highway into a blueprint for a continent-spanning web of travel. It might sound like a small thing, but it's a major breakthrough for the whole industry. The European side has big ambitions. They're sketching out a massive network that looks like a subway map stretched across an entire continent. The goal is a web of vacuum tubes spanning more than 15,000 miles and linking around 130 major cities. The idea is to make short airplane flights unnecessary. You could live in Berlin and work in Paris and travel from place to place quicker than dealing with a downtown rush hour. In Switzerland, they're testing something called the infinite loop. a circular track that works like a hamster wheel for the pod, letting engineers simulate long-distance travel without building a massive straight tube. India is also building its own test tubes, with plans aimed at connecting large cities like Mumbai and Pune, and turning a miserable 3-hour drive into a 25-minute trip. It all sounds like the future is already here, but there's a reason we don't see hyperpooling pods around already. The engineering problems are huge. One of the biggest problems is the sun. When metal heats up, it expands, and over hundreds of miles, even sunlight can make a steel tube stretch. That's a serious issue when you're trying to keep a pod zooming through a perfectly aligned tube at super high speeds. Engineers basically have to create flexible sections that let the tube move without messing up the vacuum seal. And then there's safety. A Hyperloop tube is basically a spaceship stretched across the ground. Inside, there is almost no air. Outside, normal atmospheric pressure is constantly trying to find its way in. If the tube is damaged by an accident, a structural failure, or even debris, the air does not slowly leak inside. It explodes inward. That sudden rush creates a pressure wave that races down the tube and slams into everything in its path, including the pod itself. That's why Hyperloop safety has more in common with spacecraft engineering than traditional rail. Failure here is not gradual, it's instant. So who's more likely to win this battle in the near future? In the short term, the tunnel approach is more likely to win. It's still cars and tunnels, just faster. Even if the plan gets scaled back, parts of it can still be built and used, which makes it way more likely to show up first. Hyperloop is the opposite. The payoff is bigger, but it depends on multiple hard problems being solved at the same time. Perfect vacuum tubes, reliable switching, and safety systems that can handle worst-case failures. One weak link can shut the whole thing down, so it's harder to roll out quickly. Either one could change how we travel. Either way, the goal is simple: kill the commute. So what would you trust more, a deep tunnel carved through rock or a vacuum tube above ground? Saudi Arabia is digging a pit about 1,300 feet wide for a project called the Cube. It's a giant box meant to hold a full indoor city, right in the middle of another city. It's designed to hold more people than some small towns and surround them with ever-changing digital worlds. What's hiding behind this futuristic design? Let's find out. Sure, a sci-fi Minecraft block in the middle of a historic city would definitely be a landmark, but for these architects, that is just a side quest. They actually want to create a full-scale metropolis inside a single structure. This cube, known as the Mukaab, will be the center of a brand new downtown district in Riyadh. The scale alone makes it one of the most ambitious construction projects on Earth. The plan calls for a perfect cube that stands over 1,300 feet tall and is just as wide. To put that in perspective, you could fit around 20 Empire State Buildings inside this thing. Everything here is stacked like layers in a massive high-rise, so instead of crossing streets, you'd ride high-speed elevators between levels. Inside that box, the plan is to build a colossal hall in the center. Concept art shows the roof as a massive curved screen that can project almost anything, a blue ocean above you or a sky from another planet. If it works, walking in won't feel like entering a normal building. It might feel like stepping into a different dimension. In the middle of that big space, there's a plan for a spiral tower. It's supposed to be even taller than the Eiffel Tower and have hotels, restaurants, and movie theaters inside. If you manage to book a room there, don't expect to see regular streets out your window. Instead, you'll get a view right into a massive hall, showing whatever cool digital scene is playing at that time. Surrounding this core, the rest of the cube is organized into layers that function like neighborhoods. It's a mix of homes, workplaces, and visitor areas with museums, indoor parks, and huge shopping districts. It's also supposed to have its own internal transit system to move you around, so you never have to step outside. In theory, this single building could house around 400,000 people at the same time. Saudi Arabia isn't spending this kind of money just to collect cool drone shots. The country wants less of its future tied to oil and more of it tied to visitors, tech companies, and big international events. New Murabba, the district around the Cube, is supposed to turn Riyadh into a once-in-a-lifetime sightseeing destination. On paper, the Cube works like a city-sized resort mashed together with a business district. If you live there, you sleep in the tower, work in the layers around it, and go out to parks, malls, and digital-themed worlds without ever stepping outside. For tourists, it's a giant, all-inclusive future city experience in a box. The timing is no accident. Riyadh is hosting the World Expo in 2030 and the World Cup in 2034. Millions of people will fly in with cameras in hand. If the Cube is finished by then, it will instantly be on every influencer reel and every top 10 things you won't believe exist on Earth video. That's the kind of free marketing you can't buy later. This entire dream world comes with a price. The wider New Murabba project, with the Cube as its centerpiece, carries an estimated cost of around $50 billion. That's the annual economy of a small country poured into one district. Early satellite images showed an empty patch of desert on the edge of the city. Later images from 2024 show a huge square crater exactly where the Cube is supposed to stand. Crews have already ripped out around 353 million cubic feet of earth, enough to fill thousands of Olympic pools. Zoom in and you'll see rows of excavators chewing through the ground like a metal army. That means we're way past the "is this fake" phase. Construction is already underway. The real question now is much tougher. Can you actually turn this thing into a working vertical city in one of the hottest capitals on the planet on time without creating the world's most expensive cautionary tale? First, there's the desert problem. Riyadh sits in the middle of a desert where temperatures can be extreme. In summer, afternoon temperatures can sometimes go past 113 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there. Now, a giant sealed box sounds like a perfect way to trap heat, which is great if you want to cook vegetables, but not so great if you want a comfortable city. The architects get it, so they designed the shape to help with temperature control. Instead of a flat box, the Cube is wrapped in overlapping triangular panels based on traditional Najdi patterns. These triangles break up the harsh desert sun and add more shaded surface. They also leave small gaps where air can move through. The basic idea is simple: block some sunlight to keep the inside cooler. Even with that clever shell, cooling a place like this is still a huge job. You're basically trying to air condition a small city that someone stacked upright. Every single degree outside, every sandstorm, every long summer day pushes the system harder and sends the energy bill even higher. Then there's the fake sky problem. In the concept art, the center hall looks like something out of a sci-fi game. The ceiling and parts of the walls turn into one giant curved screen, so you don't just walk into a decorated lobby. You walk into an ocean scene, or a fantasy city, or a Mars landscape that surrounds you on all sides. That kind of trick already exists in a smaller form. The Sphere in Las Vegas, for example, covers its interior with huge LED screens and throws people into moving digital worlds. The Cube wants to push that even further. Its dome would need a display that's many times larger and can give high-end results without overheating. All of this has to fit inside a very unusual building. A normal skyscraper is just a tall tower, and engineers know how to handle that. The Cube is more like a giant hollow block with a big empty space in the middle and whole neighborhoods stacked around it. It still has to stand up and hold the outer walls, plus the central tower and dome, while the inside somehow doesn't turn into a cramped maze. Then there's the people problem. On a busy day, you've got crowds moving around. In an emergency, you'll need to get them out fast. That's hard enough in a normal mall, let alone in a stacked mini city. While the cube looks like something from another planet, the main idea isn't. There are other examples of architects trying to squeeze everything they can into a single building. In Chengdu, China, the New Century Global Center already seems like a dream come true for introverts. It's huge enough to feel like a mini city under one roof. You can wake up in a hotel, stroll down indoor streets, and relax on a sandy beach under an artificial sun, all without seeing the real sky outside. Just outside Berlin, there's a huge old airship hangar that's now the Tropical Islands Resort. It's big enough to fit the Statue of Liberty standing up inside. While the countryside can be covered in snow, people inside are swimming in warm water, walking past palm trees, and hanging out under a fake summer sky. Saudi Arabia isn't new to giant futuristic projects. Neom, for example, includes plans for the Line, a straight, mirrored city stretching for miles across the desert, even after recent scalebacks. The same push is behind plans for huge stadiums and even a year-round ski resort in the mountains of the desert country. Which is not a bad thing, because even if these mega projects fall short, they push the limits of what cities can be. Thousands of years ago, people built pyramids that still confuse us. Today, technology finally lets us attempt something just as strange, only this time, it's a glowing cube in the desert. The cube is an experiment in how far we can bend engineering and imagination at the same time. Whatever the outcome, it's guaranteed to give us some exciting photos. Did you know that India is building a megastructure visible from space? It's happening in Andhra Pradesh, a region home to 50 million people and some of the worst climates on Earth. When it rains here, it pours enough to cause massive floods. When it dries, it turns fertile ground into a wasteland. This ambitious construction is supposed to solve the issue once and for all. However, if this multi-billion-dollar project backfires, the consequences could be devastating. Let's see why. The second longest river in India is called the Godavari. During the monsoon season, this river acts like a fire hose that nobody can turn off. We aren't talking about a drizzly afternoon. From June to September, the sky practically unzips. The water level rises and the river transforms from a calm stream into a chaotic force that swallows entire villages in days. But that's not all. A huge amount of that fresh water goes completely to waste. It rushes past the villages and dumps straight into the Bay of Bengal. Once it hits the salty ocean, it's useless for drinking or farming. We're talking about billions of gallons of much-needed water disappearing into the sea every single year. Now, on the other hand, we have the Krishna River Basin, just a few hundred miles away. There, it's literally the opposite issue. Farmers are staring at dry cracks in the ground. They're praying for rain that never comes. And Krishna does not get strong monsoon support, and most of its water is already used up before it even reaches this region. By the time it arrives, it's more like a tired stream than a healthy river. That's why the authorities looked at the map and came up with a solution. Basically, take the excess water from the angry river and push it over to the dry river. This brings us to the Polavaram. The engineers are building a structure that's a giant machine, not just a wall. It's built to connect these two massive water systems, like running a giant pipe from the side that has too much to the side that has almost nothing. The project combines a massive earth and rock dam with a hydropower plant and a network of canals. However, the most impressive part of this layout is the spillway. It's a giant complex of concrete, channels, and support systems. It looks less like a dam and more like a fortress built for titans. It's a gigantic safety valve for the Earth. It stretches for close to a mile across, wider than 10 football fields placed side by side, and rises several dozen feet above the riverbed. It's fitted with dozens of huge steel gates, each one weighing hundreds of tons, and built to hold back walls of water until the system decides to let them go. The spillway is incredibly powerful. It has a discharge of around 5 million cusics. In simple terms, it can blast out millions of cubic feet of water every single second. That puts it in the same league as the spillway at China's Three Gorges Dam, one of the most powerful flood control structures on the planet. Engineers designed it to handle what they call a 1,000-year flood. And no, that doesn't mean you need to mark your calendar for the year 3026. It just means there's a 0.1% chance that a flood this massive will hit the valley in any given year. Why are the architects so obsessed with these safety statistics? Because the location leaves no room for error. The Godavari Delta downstream is home to millions of people. If this project backfires, meaning the dam breaches or the gates fail during a storm, it wouldn't just be a leak. It would be a human-made tsunami. The water meant to save the region would instead wipe it off the map. The construction pace of the Polavaram project matches this insane scale. In 2019, the workers on this site set a Guinness World Record. They poured 42,000 cubic yards of concrete in exactly 24 hours. If you loaded all that concrete into standard mixers, you would fill 4,000 trucks. Line them up bumper to bumper, and you'd get a traffic jam stretching for 22 miles. Even with that in mind, the project still has a way to go. It's so big that it starts to bend its own surroundings. It won't just stop or redirect water. It might change the air itself. Once the dam is complete, it will hold a reservoir so large that it'll function like a brand new inland sea. Put that much water under the Indian sun and something obvious will happen. It'll lift into the air. Day after day, the surface will turn into a giant steam engine sending moisture upward. Scientists call this a microclimate, but we call it accidental weather control. By creating a massive body of water, you change the local humidity and temperature. You're essentially installing a giant humidifier in a region that used to be dry. This is the part that makes experts nervous. What if they accidentally create a new climate problem while trying to solve the current one? Once you block a river and create a lake this big, you start messing with the heat and moisture in the air above. The system meant to control water on the ground ends up influencing the weather overhead too. Then there is the issue of moving the water. Picture the state as two giant tanks. One is overflowing and about to burst. The other is dry. The engineers are trying to connect them with a massive pipe to balance the levels before either one becomes a disaster. How are they doing this? To pull this off, they're carving out the earth, digging two massive canals, each stretching more than 100 miles. These aren't simple ditches, they're artificial rivers carved to ignore the natural layout of the land and go where engineers tell them to go. In 2022, monsoon floods slammed into the site mid-build. Water forced its way past temporary barriers and damaged critical leak control work. The crew had to stop, assess the damage, and start restoring the damaged sections. And the risks aren't just about concrete breaking. The real cost of this project is human. To build the city of water, you have to remove the real cities of people. When the reservoir fills, it will submerge nearly 250 square miles of land. That much water does not make room for anyone. Close to 200,000 people would have to be relocated. Old forests, tribal lands, and villages that stood for generations will disappear beneath the surface. This is the price of the project. So, with all this concrete and chaos, when does the ribbon get cut? Here's the twist. This project has been ongoing since the 1940s, back when the British were still in charge. The foundation stone appeared in 1980. Real work waited until 2004. It's a rare piece of infrastructure that has outlived conflicts and economic crashes, yet it's still under construction. Major parts of the main dam are incomplete. The reservoir cannot be filled to its full height, and key power systems have not been installed. Several resettlement zones also remain unfinished, which means the final stage of the project is still years away. Aside from the ambition and the scale, money is also the reason it takes so long. Early plans estimated about $1.5 billion. Today, the cost has passed $6.5 billion and keeps climbing. But is it worth the price? Depends on who you ask. For the farmers watching their fields dry out, the answer is yes. For the families watching their homes get swallowed by the reservoir, the answer is no. The latest deadline for completion is by the end of this decade, so there are no more excuses. The Polavaram project is a testament to human ambition. It's humans looking at Mother Nature and saying, "I think you put that river in the wrong place. Let me fix that for you." Will it work? And how well? We'll find out soon. Until then, the Godavari will keep flowing and overflowing while the Krishna will keep shrinking, looking like an abandoned movie set. Welcome to Geological Mindfulness City, also known as the anti-Dubai. Because instead of massive glass skyscrapers, supercars, and neon lights everywhere, Bhutan wants to create a city that blends in with nature. It will run along the rivers, leave room for wildlife, and feel calm and walkable. This isn't some cute little eco-pilot though. It's a billion-dollar mega project with some serious next-gen tech in the mix. The plan was announced at the end of 2023 as Bhutan's biggest, boldest plan to create jobs, spark new ideas, and build a modern future. It will be constructed near the town of Geological, and it will cover about 965 square miles, which is roughly 3 times the size of Singapore. What's especially interesting is the way they imagine the city itself. It's designed to stay low, open, and spread out. One of the coolest ideas is a set of 9 bridges that people won't just pass through. They'll actually live and work there. Yep, each bridge is planned like a full piece of the city. Just to give you a few examples, one bridge will include the new international airport, another will host a university, and another will serve as a hydroelectric dam. From there, the city spreads out into 11 long, ribbon-like neighborhoods that follow the natural shape of the land. They're designed to curve around all 35 rivers and streams in the area, instead of cutting them off. Now, when we hear about rivers running through a city, we usually think about flooding, right? And yes, that's a real concern there. But what's smart is that the plan works with rivers, not against them. Along the water, they want to build paddy fields in step-like terraces that go down the hills into the valley. These terraces slow down floodwater and help hold it back. At the same time, they work like green pathways for nature. Animals can still move through the area, and even elephant routes stay open, so wildlife isn't pushed out as the city grows. Each neighborhood will be laid out like a mandala, with the same pattern repeating around a central public space. That's where people can meet up, take walks, and spend time together. The city is meant to stay close to nature, so there won't be any buildings taller than the trees. Near the wildlife sanctuaries and farmlands, the structures will be minimal and mostly residential, so those areas stay quiet and protected. Now, all of this already sounds like a super ambitious and fascinating architecture project. But what about the mindfulness part? Here's the idea. This city is supposed to reflect Bhutan's happiness-first philosophy at its core. They say Geological Mindfulness City will focus not just on economic growth, but also on the personal well-being of every person who lives there. They want residents to live in harmony with nature, while still enjoying a modern high-tech city. And they're planning some pretty unique things to make that real. Residents and visitors will be able to relax and meditate in green spaces designed especially for that. There will be community activities, ecotourism, and lots of ways to slow down. The food is meant to be fully organic, electricity will come from renewable sources, and the whole city will be designed for cycling and walking, not for cars. As you've probably noticed, this isn't a small eco-experiment. And of course, just because it won't look as flashy or high-tech as Dubai, doesn't mean it's going to be cheap. Estimates say it will cost around $100 billion. Yep, billion with a B. But you might be wondering, why spend so much money on this? Is it really gonna be worth it? Well, yes. And that's because this new mindfulness city might end up saving the whole country. You see, we're talking about Bhutan, a South Asian nation that is a little bigger than Maryland. It's home to fewer than 800,000 people, and about 70% of the country is covered in forest. It's a stunning remote place, what a lot of people describe as a kind of Shangri-La tucked into the Himalayas. You might know Bhutan as the land of the thunder dragon and also as the kingdom of happiness. And there's a reason for that. This nation is known for measuring progress using something called Gross National Happiness, or GNH. Basically, money and GDP come second. They put things like spiritual well-being, cultural preservation, and environmental protection first. In Bhutan, schools and hospitals don't come with a price tag, and happiness isn't just a personal feeling. It is a national goal and a top priority. And that's not the only thing that makes this place so special. Ever since the country unified in the 17th century, they've done everything they can to protect their identity and thrive with very little outside influence. They didn't even allow tourists in until the 1970s, and TV only arrived in 1999. Actually, in that same year, Bhutan banned plastic bags, and it made headlines around the world. So even with how fast and high-tech the world is today, the country still feels peaceful and unchanged. Visitors say it feels like you've stepped into another time. And a big reason is the architecture, as most buildings are still made in their traditional style. They also follow some pretty unique rules for living in harmony with nature. For example, they're surrounded by gorgeous mountains, but you're not allowed to climb them. That's because the mountains are considered sacred, seen as the home of deities. For them, nature isn't something you conquer, it's something you respect and protect. But things changed when this fairy tale kingdom met the modern world. Even though Bhutan is often seen as one of the happiest countries on earth, people are leaving in unprecedented numbers. Many are moving abroad for better opportunities, and a lot of them don't come back. Estimates say around 9% of the population has left in just the last few years, mostly young people. And Australia is a big example of that. The number of Bhutanese moving there doubled between 2020 and 2024. A big part of this is happening because unemployment is rising. Tourism is one of the country's main sources of income, but it's been going downhill since we all know what happened in early 2020. In 2023, for example, Bhutan welcomed only about a third of the visitors it had in 2019. And when tourism drops that hard, it hits people directly. Lots of workers lose their jobs and fewer new opportunities show up. So even if people feel happy living in Bhutan, a lot of them still feel pushed to live in search of a more stable future. But the authorities believe they can bring them back by creating good, well-paid jobs at home. And that's precisely where Geological Mindfulness City comes in. In the long run, they want this place to become a clean tech and innovation hub, bringing in global investment and giving Bhutan's economy a real lift. If everything goes as planned, it will be absolutely huge. So, tell me, are you convinced by the idea of a mindfulness city? If so, you're probably already thinking, okay, when can I move? Well, I have to warn you, this won't pop up overnight. A project this big needs time. Geological Mindfulness City will be built in phases with private partners helping fund and create everything the city needs. Roads, bridges, an airport, homes, schools, hospitals, and all kinds of businesses. The goal is that around 150,000 people could be living there within the first 7 to 10 years. And once the whole project is finished, they expect more than 1 million residents to move in. Estimates show it will probably take around 20 years for the city to be fully completed. But honestly, that wait might be totally worth it. Bhutan hopes this place won't just attract locals back home, but also draw in international investors. And if everything works fine, this city could reshape the country's economy and open the door to a stronger, more hopeful future for Bhutan. We know more about space than we do about the ocean. We know more about the ocean than we do about the Earth's core. But how do we study something that lies more than 1,000 miles beneath our feet? Oddly enough, you need to fly into space. Thanks to satellites orbiting the planet, scientists have discovered something strange at the very heart of the planet. News about mysterious signals from space barely surprises anyone. But how about this? We detected strange signals coming from deep beneath our own home. Before we go into those signals, we need to understand why it's so important to study what's inside the planet. How does the core affect us? Our lives depend on it in several crucial ways. First, the core plays a fundamental role in gravity. We don't drift off into space because a massive spherical mass of molten metal locks us to the surface. Second, it powers Earth's magnetic field. Dangerous cosmic radiation and solar wind that could scorch everything are blocked thanks to the planet's magnetic field. And third, the inner processes of the Earth influence earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Any disturbance inside the core and mantle can change life on the planet. And recently, scientists recorded something unusual coming from down there. At the beginning of this century, the United States and Germany launched a mission called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. At first, this project used 2 satellites to track how water moved around the planet and how glaciers were melting. But the satellites could also measure Earth's gravitational field. If gravity was slightly stronger or weaker in some region, one of the satellites would be pulled toward that spot, and the other would measure the change in distance. In very simple terms, the heavier something is, the stronger its gravitational pull. In certain parts of the planet, gravity can be slightly higher because of large geological shifts, ocean currents, or melting ice. But between 2006 and 2008, the GRACE satellites detected a strange change in gravity along the coast of Africa. Melting ice, water movement, and other natural phenomena couldn't explain the anomaly. No one knew what it was at the time, but years later, scientists suggested that the nature of this signal was coming from the Earth's core. Researchers noticed that some minerals, like perovskite, can undergo a phase transition when exposed to enormous pressure and extreme heat. And there are many perovskites lying in the upper layers of the mantle. When the internal structure of this mineral reshapes, it becomes denser and shifts the surrounding rocks. Deep underground, this harder, solid part moves the softer molten rock. These movements reach the molten outer core and slightly deform it. This deformation inside the core alters the flow of molten iron, and this deep current of liquid metal directly affects Earth's magnetic field. That's why satellites recorded those fluctuations. So how does all of this affect us? We launch satellites, we use compasses, we rely on GPS. All of this works only because gravity and the magnetic field are stable, and both depend on the core. That's why it's so important to study the Earth's heart. And to do that, we don't need to dig thousands of miles. Movements on the surface can reveal what is happening inside. Studying vibrations in the crust, recording gravitational shifts, calculating, modeling, and forming hypotheses. It all sounds a little boring. Is there another way to figure out what's happening down there? We sent Voyagers into space, and some of them have already left the solar system. We descend into the depths of the Mariana Trench inside bathyskiffs. So what's the problem with drilling a shaft deep into the Earth's crust? Humanity actually has some experience with this. In the 1970s, Soviet geologists began drilling the Kola superdeep borehole. It became and remains the deepest artificial borehole ever created. Its depth reaches 7.6 miles, deeper than the Mariana Trench and higher than Mount Everest. More than 50 years have passed, and humanity has not gone deeper than 7.6 miles. And do you know where the Earth's core begins? At about 1,800 miles down. That's almost 7 times farther than the distance to the International Space Station. To reach the core, we would need to drill a hole 230 times deeper than the Kola Super Deep. But that project was shut down in 1992, and the borehole was closed in 2005. What stopped us from digging deeper? First, the density of the rock. In the early stages, the drill easily cut through granite, but around 4.3 miles down, The rock became much harder. The drill broke several times. Workers had to change the drilling direction to pass through softer layers. Eventually, the borehole shape looked like a string of lights hanging on a Christmas tree. Another problem was heat. The deeper the engineers went, the hotter it became. Scientists expected that past a depth of 10,000 feet, the temperature would be around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. In reality, the harder they worked, the worse it got. Eventually, it reached 356 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest place on Earth is the Sonoran Desert along the Mexican-US border. Temperatures there can reach 177 degrees Fahrenheit. That's twice as cool as inside that terrifying borehole. And the challenges did not stop there. At a depth of about 14,800 feet, the rock became porous. The extreme heat gave it a strange plasticity. Instead of solid stone, the drill had to cut through something more like hot, softened material that was almost impossible to drill. On top of that, the stability of the shaft became a danger. At such depths, the walls could collapse at any moment. To drill deeper, humanity would need completely new technology, a drill capable of working at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature scientists expect in the upper mantle, located just beneath the crust. And to reach it, we would need to drill 25 miles down, almost 3 times deeper than the Kola superdeep. There are many rumors about what the engineers supposedly discovered in that hole. The most popular claim is that they heard the screams of thousands of people who were stuck in the fiery underworld. Other fake stories claim that the workers went insane after seeing something horrific at the bottom, and that's why the project was stopped. But if we ignore these myths, what did scientists actually find? They learned that the existing temperature model of Earth's interior was wrong. It was far hotter down there than expected. Geologists thought they would find the so-called Conrad discontinuity, a transition from granite to basalt. They found no such boundary. The real discovery was a liquid at incredible depths. Scientists found cracks filled with briny water. This changed our understanding of the crust. People used to believe it was completely solid, but now it appears full of fractures and channels through which water can move. Where did it come from? Geologists think the fluid was squeezed out of the rocks by enormous pressure, as water is wrung out of a sponge. But the most astonishing discovery was life. At about 4.5 miles down, engineers found ancient fossils of single-celled marine organisms. They were nearly 2 billion years old, and they had survived at such extreme heat and pressure. Let's imagine that one day we actually reach the mantle. What would that give us? What would we expect to see? We would finally understand how Earth formed billions of years ago, how the core, mantle, and crust developed, and how plate tectonics works. We'd know how the plates push and pull against each other. We'd gain a deeper understanding of earthquakes. Researchers also hope to find extremophiles. These are primitive organisms that can withstand extreme heat and pressure. If we discover life near the mantle or even within it, scientists will study it closely and try to understand how it manages to survive under such brutal conditions. If we learn what keeps life alive in the most hostile environment beneath our feet, we might learn how to protect life in other extreme places, from the depths of the ocean to distant planets. Studying the heart of our planet could reveal technologies we can barely imagine today. Our future might depend on the mysteries hidden beneath our own world. Tiny microbes, basically ancient germs, have been frozen in Arctic ice for tens of thousands of years, just chilling there, since woolly mammoths were still walking around. And now, scientists think these little guys might wake up again if Arctic summers keep getting longer and warmer. Yep, you heard right. Zombie microbes. Great. These microbes have been stuck in permafrost, which is soil and ice that stays frozen solid year-round. The top layer melts a bit in the summer, but the really old stuff, those Ice Age microbes, are buried way deeper. They only thaw if things get really warm for months, not just a hot day or two. To study these microbes, the team went down to the permafrost research tunnel near Fairbanks in Alaska. a long underground hallway 50 feet below the surface, carved right into the ancient frozen ground. The tunnel stretches over 350 feet and lets scientists literally walk through thousands of years of frozen history. By the way, while checking out the walls, the researchers also spotted bones of mammoths and bison sticking out of the ice. One of the reasons why the researchers went to Alaska was to see how fast these ancient microbes could come back to life. Well, they were in for a surprise. These microbes don't need years, centuries, or magic spells to wake up. Just a couple of months of warm weather. Once they're awake, they start doing their microbe stuff, which includes pumping out greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane. And that's bad news, because those gases warm the planet even more. This melts more permafrost, which wakes up more microbes, which releases more gas. You get it. Basically, it's a nasty climate loop. Anyway, when scientists went down into the frozen tunnel to grab chunks of super old permafrost, the first thing they noticed was the awful smell. It wasn't just the stench of an old basement. It was something has been frozen for thousands of years and is finally waking up bad. Weirdly, microbiologists were happy. Such a smell is actually a good sign for them because it usually means tiny creatures, microbes, are still around. Back in the lab, the team soaked the frozen samples in the water that had a special kind of heavy hydrogen inside it. This helped them track what the microbes were doing later. Then they put the samples into fridges at 3 different temperatures: cold, kinda cold, and not too cold, to copy what future Arctic summers might feel like if the warming continues. For the first month, almost nothing happened. Even the warmer samples barely changed. Only a tiny number of microbes started waking up. Basically, a microscopic trickle of activity. But a few months later, things got more exciting. Thanks to the heavy water, scientists could watch how much of it the microbes used to build their cell membranes. It helped them figure out that the old microbes were making special fatty molecules that might help them stay alive in freezing conditions. By the 6-month mark, the samples that were stored at the warmer temperatures had transformed completely. They became more active and started forming little slime layers. The scientists could actually see these layers even without a microscope. The whole community of microbes wasn't super diverse, but those that were active behaved just like modern microbes that live in unfrozen soil today. In short, those ancient microbes were definitely alive and got pretty energetic once the temperatures were warm enough. This matters a lot for the Arctic and for the whole planet because these microbes survive by eating old organic material trapped in the permafrost. When they eat, they release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, and the Arctic is warming faster than any other part of Earth. It means that the deep frozen layers might stay warm long enough for huge numbers of ancient microbes to wake up and start pumping out gas. Right now, northern permafrost holds about twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere. If a lot of that carbon gets released, it could speed up the warming of our planet. It can lead to dramatic consequences, setting off a whole chain of huge changes and affecting basically everything on Earth. Extreme weather will start happening more often. Stronger hurricanes, heavier rainstorms, longer heat waves, bigger wildfires. The oceans will rise too, which can flood coastlines and put towns and cities at risk. Animals, plants, and entire ecosystems can get thrown out of balance, with some species struggling to survive and food chains breaking down. People all over the world will have to deal with crop failures, water shortages, and damaged homes or infrastructure. Let's get back to our zombie microbes. The thing is, the study only looked at them in one place in Alaska, but there's a massive amount of permafrost all over the world, in Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and many other places. And microbes in different regions might behave differently as things warm up. Scientists still have tons of work to do to figure out what's coming next. I bet you're questioning yourself. Could ancient viruses infect us? Well, most of the ancient microbes frozen in permafrost are totally harmless. They're like old bacteria that only care about messing with other tiny organisms in the dirt. But scientists worry that a few of these frozen germs might be the kind that can infect people, animals, or plants. And if that happened, our bodies probably wouldn't recognize them at all, because they've been frozen since mammoths existed. Basically, there's no immune system cheat codes for us. The risks of this happening grow for a number of reasons. For one thing, the Arctic is warming almost 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Longer summers plus hotter temperatures mean more permafrost melting. So, more ancient stuff is waking up. Plus, people might start digging more around there. Companies will mine more, drill for oil, and ships can travel new routes. All this activity tears open ground that used to stay frozen solid. This increases the chance that someone or something comes across some ancient germ that just woke up. What would actually happen then? We might run into different zoonotic diseases, basically germs that jump from animals to humans. This already happened once. Thawed reindeer carcasses released anthrax, a rare and serious illness which then infected people and animals. Luckily, we do know how to treat anthrax. But what if something even older wakes up? Besides, our immune system might have zero defense. If a virus hasn't been around for tens of thousands of years, humans today would be like, what is that thing? No antibodies, no memories of it, nothing. But the scariest part is that we don't know what's hiding down there. Scientists think permafrost might be storing trillions of frozen microbes, many of which we've never seen before. Some might be boring, and some might be super dangerous. So what if one such virus finally thawed out? The world would be dealing with a disaster no one has ever seen before. This wouldn't look like a normal outbreak. It would feel more like something out of a horror movie. First, the virus would be totally new and our immune systems definitely wouldn't recognize it. That means the virus would spread crazy fast, jumping from person to person. No one would know what to expect. It could cause weird illnesses, sudden fevers, or even something way more dangerous. Stuff as scary as the diseases people faced in old times. Scientists digging in permafrost already look for traces of those ancient diseases, so it's not impossible. Once it escapes, the virus wouldn't stay local for long. With people traveling everywhere and companies rushing into the warming Arctic for mining and shipping, the infection could go from one small Arctic village to major cities all over the world within days. Hospitals would fill up instantly and doctors and nurses would run out of supplies. Businesses would shut down. Food supplies could crash if the virus hit farm animals or crops. Shipping and travel could freeze completely. Fear and panic would spread around the globe almost as fast as the virus itself. There'd be no vaccine and no cure, because no one has ever seen this virus before. Scientists would have to start from zero. In short, a zombie virus outbreak would be totally unpredictable, and the modern world is certainly not ready for it. Saudi Arabia wants to host the Asian Winter Games right in the middle of the desert. No more climbing frozen mountains in gear heavier than you are. No icy valleys, just camels, endless sand, and a sun that can fry an egg if you crack it on a metal plate. Let's explore one big and unexpected idea: building a futuristic ski landmark in a place where snow is treated as a big deal. Desert countries have already tried similar things. Dubai built its own ski slope inside a shopping mall almost 20 years ago. You could buy sneakers, grab a snack, and then go skiing without ever stepping outside. It blew people's minds back then, but compared to the project Trojena, it feels tiny. This is not an indoor side attraction. It's part of a roughly $500 billion plan to carve out a winter zone inside a desert region, right in the middle of real mountains. Trojena sits in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, in a mountain area with sharp ridges and long, empty stretches of land between them. It is one part of a much bigger strategy called NEOM, a plan to build new cities and resorts across this region. This whole zone is part of a desert belt across the Arabian Peninsula. with towns far apart and long stretches where you mostly see rock, sand, and sky. The climate here is really harsh. Summer days go past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and by noon, the heat hits you from above and below like you're being baked. Leaving anything metal in direct sunlight is a really bad idea. Winters bring some relief, especially in the higher peaks. Nights can get pretty chilly, and now and then, those peaks pick up a thin layer of snow. It looks nice, but it doesn't stick around. It melts in a day or two before you can even take pictures, let alone think of skiing. Maybe you wonder, but why go through so much trouble just for a ski center? Well, here's the funny part. It's a lot more than just a ski center. The plan is to build an entire winter city, a place with ski runs, hotels, cable cars, housing zones, golf courses, and even a crystal-shaped tower planned to be roughly the same height as the Eiffel Tower. Trojena covers about 23 square miles with about 18.6 miles of ski slopes threading across the mountains. The whole idea is to turn Trojena into a one-of-a-kind attraction that people put on their must-visit list. You ski in the morning, hike in the afternoon, and spend the day by a huge artificial lake. That lake is supposed to be the main attraction of the resort, held in place by 3 giant dams. Building something like that on desert rock is tough. The ground can shift and leak, so everything has to be sealed and reinforced before the lake can even exist. But even if they build the entire complex, there's still a detail they can't ignore. This place doesn't get enough natural snow for any of it to work, not even close. That's why the entire project has to rely on machines or some advanced technology to produce most of the snow. Snow machines help by blowing cold air into the air, where it turns into tiny ice bits that cover the slopes. It works, but the sun in this region warms the ground fast, so the snow can soften or melt unless they constantly top it up. The machines also need a lot of water. Since this area doesn't have natural lakes or rivers, NEOM's plan is to pull in desalinated seawater from the Red Sea coast and push that fresh water through pipes and storage systems across all its zones, including mountain areas. That needs long pipes and strong pumps, plus a steady power supply so nothing shuts down when it gets hot. And even with all that, the air still has to be cool enough for snow to form properly. If it's too warm, the machines can spray all they want, but the snow won't stick. So engineers have to study the slopes and figure out which parts stay cooler and which parts heat up too fast. All of this takes a huge amount of electricity, and Trojena is supposed to get its power from NEOM's renewable energy system, which includes solar, wind, and stored energy. Solar sounds perfect because this region gets sun almost every day. But there is a catch. Panels like light, not extreme heat. When they get too hot, they produce less power, and that could happen right when the snow machines need steady energy the most. So the same sun that makes this place perfect for solar power can also make the panels lazier at the worst possible moment. All of this shows the basic plan, but how to sync everything in unpredictable heat is making engineers work overtime. And that challenge starts with the ground they're building on. Shifting soil or rock can delay progress or force redesigns. Then there's the problem of distance. The site is pretty far from major cities, so hauling materials to Trojena means dragging heavy equipment across miles of empty desert. Even with better roads, moving materials can still drag things down. A project of this size needs a huge workforce, special machinery, and advanced cooling systems, plus constant checks to keep everything running. Even with a massive budget, unexpected issues can pile up, so we have already seen slowdowns in other parts of NEOM. So Trojena could face the same problems. None of this means the project cannot succeed. It only shows how complicated it is to build something this big in a place that is not naturally made for what they're trying to create. When you put all the pieces together, it becomes clear why Trojena may be one of the most ambitious proposals ever. But what about some other engineering wonders that didn't seem possible at first? The Three Gorges Dam in China is one of those ideas that makes you pause and gasp. It stretches more than 7,500 feet across the Yangtze River and stands taller than the Statue of Liberty. To make it work, engineers moved over 1 million people and flooded entire valleys. When it finally started running, it became the largest hydroelectric power source in the world, sending electricity to millions of homes and helping protect cities downstream from dangerous floods. Another example is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. It's one of the biggest sea crossings ever built and the longest sea bridge in the world, stretching almost 35 miles and linking Hong Kong, Zhuhai, and Macau. To build it, engineers had to deal with deep water, heavy ship traffic, storms, and strong currents. They drove huge piles into the seabed, built artificial islands, and even added an underwater tunnel so large ships could pass through. The goal was to allow cars and buses to cross the sea in one trip instead of taking ferries. When Qatar hosted the World Cup, it had to solve a serious heat problem. The summer weather there can make it hard to even stand outside, let alone play soccer. To keep players and fans safe, engineers built a cooling system under the seats, inside the walls, and around the field that pushes cold air across the pitch and lowered the temperature in the whole stadium. Cooling such a huge open space is much harder than cooling a normal building, but they still succeeded in turning this giant hot bowl of air into something closer to an air-conditioned arena. All these accomplished grand plans show that we should not write off Trojena yet. It has a few big things working in its favor. The budget is massive, the authorities are fully behind it, and NEOM is being built to support it with roads, energy, and workers. Whether they finish in time for the Winter Games is still a question, but if they do pull it off, Trojena could end up as one of the most famous tourist spots on the planet. Deep under the ground, beneath the forests, the rivers, and the cities of Brazil, scientists have found a treasure. Not chests full of gold coins and jewels. This treasure isn't oil either. In fact, 100 years ago, almost nobody cared about this material at all. But today, this treasure has the power to turn any country into a superpower. So what is it? Ready? Brazil has discovered enormous deposits of REE, rare earth elements. If you want a shorter name, just call them the new gold. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 elements from the periodic table. Chemists divide them into two groups, light rare earths from lanthanum or europium, and heavy rare earths from gadolinium to lutetium. For most people, these names sound like magic spells from the world of Harry Potter. Avada Samarium, expecto gadolinium. You may never have heard of these names before, but they're hiding everywhere around us. Our modern world would collapse without them. We call them rare because they don't usually gather in one place. They're spread out through large areas of rock and soil, so it takes a lot of work to collect them. They're hiding from us, and we have to dig and separate and process huge amounts of ground before we get a small amount of these elements. But what do we get in return? We get technology. We get clean air, better energy efficiency, lighter parts for machines, brighter screens, and stronger magnets. Rare earth elements are like secret ingredients. On their own, they don't look impressive. But when you combine them with other materials, they produce powerful reactions. They make glass for lenses, engines, phones, headphones, MRI machines, solar panels, and many other things. Without them, airplanes would be heavier, rockets would be slower, screens would be darker, and many products simply wouldn't exist. One example is neodymium, which is used to make magnets. Not those that you put on your fridge after travel. A wind turbine needs a magnet made from neodymium. That turbine produces electricity. The electricity charges your laptop. Your laptop lets you watch videos and play games. It's just a magnet, but it directly affects your life. But this magnet can't exist without neodymium. A tiny element in the ground becomes a tiny part inside a giant production that keeps our modern world running. And this is far from the only use of neodymium. And here is why Brazil matters. This country has a chance to become the second largest supplier of rare earth elements in the world and the #1 outside of Asia. Mining these elements creates jobs for thousands of people. Processing and selling these metals is a huge boost for the economy. But talking about economic indicators is boring, so let's play a game instead. You'll hear the name of a rare element like a spell from a magic book and try to guess what it's used for. Yeah, once the game is over, you won't magically turn into a REE expert, but you'll surely get to know the subject matter. Maybe you'll even want to work in this field someday. Ready? The first element is scandium. What is it used for? Making books, baseball bats, or chainsaws? The answer is bats. People use scandium to make super strong metal alloys and ultra-light components. Where else can we see it? In bicycle frames, aerospace parts, rocket components, stadium lights, and even X-ray machines. Scandium helps send spacecraft into the sky and produce semiconductors. You have heard that word many times, but many people don't know what it means. A semiconductor is something that can let electricity through and also block it. It's like a tap. Water can flow or it can stop. Semiconductors do the same thing with electric current inside microchips. They're essential for every piece of modern electronics. Next, yttrium. Where can you find it? TVs, ceramics, or batteries? It was a tricky one, so the answer is everywhere. Plus, this element is essential for superconductors. A superconductor is a material that can carry electric current with zero electrical resistance, meaning no energy is lost as heat. In ordinary materials, electricity always produces heat because of resistance, but when superconducting materials are cooled to very low temperatures, resistance disappears and current flows perfectly and safely. Yttrium-based components are crucial components of certain high-temperature superconductors, helping make them practical and usable in real-world applications. So this is also a crucial element for scientists who love to conduct experiments with extremely low temperatures. Yttrium is also added to metals to make them stronger, more heat-resistant, and even more resistant to radiation. In other words, this element is a magic boost for metals. Here comes lanthanum. It sounds like a mighty wizard from a fantasy world who uses spells of illusions or mind control. But what is it for in the real world? Lenses from video cameras? A pencil lead? Air conditioners? Lanthanum is used to make optical glass in camera lenses. When you watch a beautiful scene in a movie or take a photo with your phone, you can quietly thank lanthanum and the people who mined it from the ground. It's also used in oil refining, helping us get fuel and energy that our machines need. Cerium is yet another unsung hero. What does it do? Does it help purify the air, boil water in a kettle, or ensure the operation of vacuum cleaners? It helps the environment. Cerium is used in catalytic converters. These devices clean toxic gases from car exhaust. Without cerium, the air in big cities would be much dirtier. Cerium is also used to clean water and to produce glass that protects from radiation. In a way, this rare element is our shield against poison, pollution, and radioactive danger. Now meet praseodymium. I've got a hint here. It's used in extreme conditions. Which ones? Cold, heat, or vacuum? Praseodymium helps to carry out work in extremely low temperatures, far below the coldest point in Antarctica. It's also used in lasers, magnets, and even for making yellow-green pigments in glass and ceramics. So next time you see a cup colored that way, you can nod wisely and say, "Ah yes, I see a praseodymium." The next element is essential for anyone who loves music. Meet neodymium. What do you think? Are these headphones, microphones, or synthesizers that work thanks to it? This element is used to make magnets that are necessary for speakers, headphones, and hard drive production. It also helps to create high-strength permanent magnets, which are crucial for electric car engines, wind turbines, and many other things. But for most people, the magic of neodymium is simple. It gives us music in our headphones while we ride the bus, walk in the park, or relax at home. REE are everywhere. Even if some objects doesn't contain them inside it, rare earths are probably used to make the machines that produced this object. But that is not all. Brazil also has huge deposits of graphite. Graphite is not a rare earth element, but it's still extremely important. When people hear the word graphite, they think of pencil tips, but that is only a tiny part of its story. Graphite is used to make fire-resistant laboratory containers, lubricants for machines, heat insulation for buildings, anti-corrosion coatings, chemical reagents, and even parts of nuclear reactors. Another treasure that Brazil has is lithium. It's not REE, but our modern world depends on it very much. Today, most modern batteries can't work without lithium. Your phone, your laptop, your electric car, iPad, and camera. All of these devices run on these batteries. Most of the world's lithium comes from Australia. Argentina and Chile produce large amounts too, but Brazil is rising fast. In 2023, this country became the 5th largest producer of lithium. Soon, it may reach 3rd place. Brazil is also a global supplier of nickel, which has its own long list of applications. But we'll stop before your brain melts from too much information. Now you've heard about rare earth elements and the surprising role they play in our lives. They're invisible to us, but they power our world. They help us travel, communicate, create, and dream. That's why this treasure under the soil of Brazil is so valuable. It's not just elements, it's the future. Game over. Congratulations, you've just completed REE 101. Here's your certificate. See you next time.